They came from a very, very difficult century in the past. There is this mentality of catching up, of honor, basically showing that, like China in the past was a very great nation.
Meet Fabian, a Belgian who's been living in China for 16 years. He's married to a Chinese wife and runs a contract manufacturing company. Fabian explains the main misconceptions about China in the West, the biggest differences between life in China and Europe, and what you should never do as a foreigner in China. I'm Max Chernov, your insider to Expat Life. Doba.
What do you think the biggest misconceptions about China in the West right now?
Is the uniformity of China. I mean, in a way, China is of course a very uniform nation, very well organized and things like that. But you just realize very, very much that from north to south, from east to west, you have a lot of different cultures. What I really enjoyed doing in the first few years is visiting all these minorities that live in different provinces, and that's really charming. Tasting the different type of foods, and I think I'm still not at the end of it.
Yeah.
So that was a big difference from what I had preconceived.
Why you decided to stay in China?
What motivated me to stay is opportunities mainly. At a younger time in my career, I really wanted to do something significant. I saw that basically China was the place to be back in the days in the early 2010 or late 2000s.
Yeah.
Lots of investments, lots of companies were flocking in, and the questions that was in being asked in pubs back in Europe or things like that is like, oh, you are not having any operations in China, you're not thinking of doing anything with China, because that was very much
a big trend.
There was a big trend, and realizing how the scale of everything here, it's a company that was really it's a country that was really really boosting a lot of development. We remember, let's say, the growth, the two-digit growth years that China had in those times. It's compared to the good old Europe, which has a lot of because very, very, very interesting size, but the dynamic was so different. The speed of things was so different. The scale of things was really different. And I think I said, okay, well, there is definitely some opportunities to take.
In Europe, it's slow, here is fast.
Yeah.
What are the biggest differences, you think, how people live or how people work, or how the country functions?
I think there is the whole thing of central planning. It's a one political system. There are, of course, other parties that are consulted, in a great whole of the people. But it's a system that basically can help to get momentum, and there is also the long-term planning. In modern days democracies, we must say that political systems are what they are. They basically can bring different parties into power. That shift, over sometimes every 4 years, every 10 years, because there is a bit of a shift. China, for that, has been a lot more stable in a way that they wanted to move forward. The long-term planning over literally generations is something that is really important for the Chinese. So that's the way that there is very much a direction on the long term. A vision on the long term is one thing. I think there is also a bit of the mentality of the people. As a matter of fact, they came from a very, very difficult century in the past.
Yeah.
And there is this mentality of catching up, of honor. Basically showing that China in the past was a very great nation. They had a little bit their tough time, the tough period.
Yeah.
But the pride of the Chinese people is still very much in them, even if they are not very exuberant about it. I mean, they have this aspiration of basically raising their country to the next level. So a lot of that is in the people. The working culture is also quite different. So sometimes it's a little bit excessive these days. We know that especially the younger generation would not be a big fan of the 996 kind of mentality, if not more like the 997.
And it's because I also have a team, and it's you don't push hard the people in their 20s.
Exactly. So like the I would say in general, especially in big cities like this. I mean, like the concentration of young people and people that came into these cities, if not city clusters, like here in South China, is enormous. I mean, like it's hundreds of millions of people that move into one place for the goal of making a career.
Yeah.
Making a bit extra money compared to the countryside or farming the land. So that in essence is already like, okay, going into a factory as an assembly worker, I was kind of very surprised in my first years to hear that, well, the overtime for an employee is primordial, is very important. If there is no overtime, they would not take the job. While in certain economies, in developed economies, the comfort of living is much higher. There is a lot of benefits that are provided by the government. There is a lot of protectionism around the labor, and that is that basically creates a different dynamic.
Yeah, very interesting. Like you also mentioned the scale.
Yeah.
Like I was having a trip yesterday from Guangzhou to Shenzhen, by car to Shenzhen, and then back by train. Like going by car is like, it's everything is enormous.
Yeah.
It's insanely. It's like huge Guangzhou, and then it's becoming like some industrial site, some.
Exactly. You go basically.
And it's just a small part of China.
Exactly.
It's like wow.
It's one of the most interesting area in China. I mean, like you have. Like the Yangtze River Delta, you have the Chongqing-Chengdu corridor, you have the Greater Bay Area here.
Yeah.
These are big industrial clusters, and there are some others as well. And this one is particularly like open on the world. Like it started, like from the perspective of Hong Kong, a city, like the Asia capital city, and from there basically like when you travel between these 9 cities that you have on the side of China mainland, and your example is very good, because from Guangzhou to Shenzhen, that's if you take the old highway, you don't see a single field.
Yeah.
It's just like leaving the city, going from industrial zones to industrial zones, factories. You go through Dongguan, which is a big manufacturing center, and then you end up into the ultra-modern city of Shenzhen. And that's not like 20 kilometers. We are talking about 100 kilometer, if not more, 120 kilometer from city to city, and that's the scale, the size that a lot of people, struggle to understand.
You have friends or family visiting you?
Yeah. I had my parents visiting me quite a few times.
Yeah. What was their impressions at the first visit?
I would say it's almost like an interesting experiment, because it's your family. You have a bit of a head start on what is China, and you want to show that.
Yeah.
You want to say, okay, share a little bit the experience that I had to discover this country. And of course, it's one generation difference, but very, very interesting to see the signals, to see how basically they welcome like these surprise. Like of course, we went to my family in-law. We had a great dinner in a traditional Chinese fashion. Nice. And they just loved it. They were just like so surprised to see how open are these people and heartwarming. Is reading a bit of the book of cultural differences, but the very good page of it.
What do you think were their expectations? Like, what do you expected to see here?
We're mostly expecting the things that they see a lot on media, even though like the first time that they really travel to China was still very much what we say in the golden years, when there was a lot of foreign direct investment. There was no, let's say, much backlash about China, but it was maybe like a little bit at the very beginning of it, and they were most probably expecting a country that has some challenges, pressing challenges, and it has pressing challenges, but like the picture given about from media about these things is very dramatic. And when you come here,
but the picture is what? It's like
it's not a lie, by the way.
It's like undeveloped. This type of stuff.
There are of course areas in China that are undeveloped. They are basically like certain structural problems that needs to be addressed in China. That is a fact, but it's not the only thing that China is all about. There are so many other beautiful aspects. They were, for instance, very surprised to see how China is beautiful as a country. It's never really like portrayed much. You need to find a very good documentary, maybe on National Geographic or something like that, that speaks about these aspects. But if you look at like the evening news on your national channel, when there is something about China, it's not necessarily like about scientific advance or how beautiful the nature is. It's just like, there is state visits, there are tensions, there are basically things that are happening in this world. So I would say they were maybe expecting a very difficult situation, but actually they found a country full of heartwarming people and a certain level of commonality. Of course, there is a lot of differences between our nations, but they were like this very humane approach to these dinners, these good times, the rapport that you can establish, that we can build. Was really surprising to them.
And your wife, she's from Guangzhou?
She's actually from Xi'an.
Did she grow up with the sense like, I wanna like move abroad? I wanna, I don't know, go to UK or
Interestingly,
America?
yes. My wife, her name is Vicky. She's from a Hui minority. And the Hui minority are known basically like to be traders and travelers between China and the Middle East countries, more specifically Iran. So they were very much like trading, having these routes, the old Silk Roads, and that it's not maybe like the mainstream line of thinking compared to the Han Chinese, but indeed there is a little bit part of their blood, this kind of traveling and outward thinking. So she has taken the opportunity to travel abroad, to in the UK, in the United States, taking some different period of her life in a short period of time, but also and very much like interested into what's happening outside of this country. So that's maybe like where the alchemy is working. Is really like it.
Was it like when she started? Maybe she explained to you when she started traveling. Like, was it the same picture as they had in her head before going to the West?
Yeah, pretty much. Interestingly, like I also believe that the Chinese know a lot more about what's happening outside of China than what outsiders from China knows about what's happening inside China. I think it's just like the way it is broadcasted, and so they're very observant, and I think she reads really well the different culture. As a matter of fact, I think she has a very high EQ, so she understands very quickly like how people think, and like what certain gestures mean, and the character of people, and what is important for them. So it's that's
For you, was it difficult to like start dating a Chinese girl and then marry a Chinese girl?
Well, it's not particularly difficult, I would say, but it took a bit of adaptation to understand what a relationship means. So that was a little bit like the experience at the very beginning, that you need to kind of it's a bit fault finding and trying to see like what exactly. It's a little bit learning by experience, not always the most pleasant experience. Once you get that, I think you understand basically what is important.
As for the like family traditions, like the religious part and traditions part, like anything specific that you were like not prepared to?
It took me actually, I'm not trying to say, several years to really understand to a minimum level the do's and the don'ts, what matters to the Chinese.
Can you give me an example, like the do's and the don'ts? Like the don'ts, like what you don't want to do with Chinese?
Well, what I would not want to do, definitely like showing disrespect or looking down into people. So that's something which is a big no-no. I mean, like we know that in companies, you can see that colleagues, even if they have difficult times to understand each other or do not know or necessarily agree with each other, they show a great amount of respect to a level that it's sometimes a bit hard to understand, and we need to read a little bit all these signals, trying to understand what they want to mean. It's just because it's not always in us as Westerner, and that's basically like filter or basically that's that great attention to respect is something that we need to be very, very attentive about.
Can you give an example? Like, let's say you don't say no, this kind of things, or you don't say what you want because it can offend.
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, like, show interest, for instance, in you have a new type of food on the table. Don't necessarily like look for the food that you are used to eat, but be curious. Try, have some new experience. Yeah, sure. Maybe like it's not very much of your taste. It can happen. But like it's a mark of respect, a token of appreciation to try a little bit everything around the table, to be very open about it as well eventually. But that's maybe like one very simple way of showing like how we should respect what is being on offer, how we should basically like you are welcome as a family. They open the door to you. They are very curious to know about you. So there's this whole thing that needs to be given back and interacting. Most probably, like with different generations, sometimes with a translator and with the help of my wife. But I mean, it's really like very important to give the right signal.
You're like dealing with businesses, right?
Yeah.
Anything specific, like maybe some advice if you want to deal with like Chinese counterparts and you're doing business and you're from America or Europe, like what would be the way to do it right?
In the West, we'd like to work with a lot of contracts and agreements and rules and things like that. When we do that here, signing a contract is the beginning of the negotiation. So it's like things can change. The business mentality, like it's not because it's written in contract that it's going to happen that way. There is a lot of investment in time and relationship between two business partners that needs to take place to a much higher level. It's less contractual, but more like a social experience to get into a business. I mean, like there is certain obligations from both parties, of course. That's very clear. But countless suppliers, basically, like when there is a problem, we don't always like go in the office discussing things around the meeting table. No, well, we take the time maybe like to have a lunch or dinner, and we basically like look at solutions, and the format is very different. And I must say, like even in the most difficult relationship or business relationships, there is always like in the end a very collaborative approach. It's been very, very unusual to have a situation where there is absolutely no hope for negotiation or for an amicable settlement. It can happen. We should never rule out this eventuality, but I would say lots of business partners, Chinese business partners, would like to find a solution. They like to search for that.
Yeah. And let's say you're having a lunch with your like Chinese partner. You probably don't go straight to the business. You probably like ask about the family, this kind of thing. That's how it works. Or you need to still like be precise about what you want.
When you engage into a business, of course, well, we are into the technical matters in what we do. So the exactitude, the precision, the accuracy, clarifying the demand is really, really important. What often happens, the party that we engage with is willing to engage into the business relationship, willing to try, takes it as basically like, okay, well, let's do business together. Not necessarily knowing what would be the outcome. It can be like that at a smaller business volume or like small business relationships. Maybe like, of course, when there is an investment from a big company into the country, the dynamic, as you can imagine, is very different. But then it becomes very contractual. But this engagement into a relationship is all about finding each other, helping each other, and there should be like gestures going in that sense from both sides. So that's the fair way of having a healthy deal between a foreign company and a local businessman.
Yeah. Regarding the manufacturing in China, it's a huge thing.
Oh yeah.
Is it still like the best manufacturing the products? It's still China is the best?
Oh yeah.
Or India is compared to Vietnam is compared to now?
In terms of manufacturing, China has a huge capacity and also capability. So there is no country that I can think of, no major economy that is built and capable of scaling up new technologies or industrializing new technologies better than China. So, of course, there is a lot of companies, also of medium and small size, that would think of internationalizing, not putting all the eggs in the same basket. But I still believe that the China component into an international business in manufacturing is a big component of success. They are, of course, business is getting more and more difficult. Opportunities are harder and harder to find, but there are still some. And this is where companies need to really think of adaptability, not reinventing themselves necessarily, but improving themselves or going into perfecting certain skills. And that's where still for foreign business like ours, there is plenty of opportunities.
Yeah. Do you think that the world can decouple from China, that live without China? Because after Trump elections, all the tariffs and stuff. So is it really possible to basically, we can live without China?
The simple answer is no.
Yeah.
There is if we really talk about the world and thinking of Asia, of China really self-isolating itself, I don't even, it never really crossed my mind. But when it comes to the fragmenting or basically the reorganization of trade lines, this is something that is currently happening. Not always the way that we would like it to be, especially also as a Westerner, as a European.
Yeah.
We can't say that basically the trade imbalance between the EU bloc and China has peaked. By the way, 2 years ago. Now it's going a little bit lower, but it's still very significant. So it's a problem to be addressed. Of course, there is beyond the EU bloc, one very well developed economy, the US. One very fast developing, and we can say so now, new developed economies in China. There are some other economic power that also have a role to play. So the whole dynamic of the unipolar world is shifting, is drifting away. I'm a big believer that, and I hope in a Pacific outcome, that multipolar world is a possibility. It doesn't have to be building a huge sphere of influence. Of course, I would say that trade and what makes a power is a lot of influence. It's a byproduct.
Yeah.
But you have difference between being influential and important in the world and being hegemonic. And that's where I think there will be a lot of work to do, especially between the two most powerful nations, to make sure that, well, it sounds very ideal and a bit dreamy, but I mean that it happens without major disruption for all the rest of the world. So that's and that's where I think what will play a very important role in the balance is the global South, the developing economies. China has gone through so many levels, from a primary economy to a secondary to a industrialization and now an economy of services, that and they do it in a way that it's not basically agrarian economy is still very present. Yeah. They still care very much. They industrialize and they're very strong in that, but they go into service without deindustrializing. And keeping these three components working well together makes it actually possible to sell lower added value trade goods to developing economies where they need it the most.
Yeah.
It's not a race necessarily to the technologies to say, okay, we want to be more advanced in space than the US. No, it's the three of them combined. And that's where I think there is hope.
There is hope. So
there is not. It's never going to be a simple task. Even so slim can be the hope. Maybe sometimes we can think there is a possibility that when people will have enough, when like the people from African nations, Latin America, maybe to a lesser extent, the Middle East will say, well, like I think we've gone a little bit too far. That's their voice, I think, will definitely have the merit to be heard, because that might be playing more and more into the balance.
What's the biggest lesson that China taught you through this 16 years?
Patience.
Patience.
Oh yeah, I'm a naturally impatient person. I like things to happen. I like them to happen fast, in an efficient manner. But still, even like in a very recent years, I had some gentle reminders that like not everything happens in the way that you always want. And the best way to deal with that is actually to build patience, to be a bit more empathetic, to be a bit more considerate. So that's something that I think really like China has learned me.